Morning, everybody. Welcome on this sunny morning. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Arts Hustings 2024. I'm Lizzie Crump. I'm a woman with short brown hair, glasses, and very large earrings of angel wings. I'm the co-director of What Next, and we're a UK-wide movement that brings together freelancers and organisations to debate and shape the future of art and culture.
And I'm Jack Gamble. I'm a man with short blonde hair, glasses, and a black shirt. I'm the director of the Campaign for the Arts. We champion, defend, and expand access to the arts in the UK with the public, for the public.
We've joined together as two free-to-access movements because we believe that the arts matter to all of us. And when thinking about their future, everyone should be part of the conversation.
The issues and questions that will be put to the parties today were crowdsourced from the cultural sector and the wider public via What Next and the Campaign for the Arts. Our thanks go to the Southbank Centre for helping to broadcast these hustings live.
None of our organisations is party political. We're not interested in telling you how to vote in next week's general election.
We are interested in shedding as much light as we possibly can on what different parties are saying and not saying on the issues that matter for the arts.
So without further ado, let's meet the people who'll be guiding us through today's hustings. To help us set the scene, we welcome Suzanne Alleyne. Suzanne sits on the What Next leadership group. She's a cultural thinker. She's the founder of Alleyne and she's a researcher and consultant who asks questions about power. Welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you.
And to help us ensure that the parties stick to time and stick to the question, we welcome our chair, Baroness Deborah Bull, CBE. Deborah sits as a crossbench peer in the House of Lords, so she's not affiliated to any political party. She's made a huge contribution to the arts, whether it's as principal dancer of the Royal Ballet, creative director of the Royal Opera House, or in her work as a broadcaster and writer. Welcome, Deborah.
Thank you very much, Jack. So, hello, I'm Suzanne. For those that it's useful, I'm a black woman with dark hair and a top knot. I've got glasses and a pale green shirt. Welcome, Deborah.
Thanks, Suzanne, and hello, everybody. I'm Deborah Bull. I am a white middle-aged woman with a collar length, I think you'd say brown hair. I've got glasses and I'm wearing a green and black shirt today. I'm sitting in a rather red room.
So together, Deborah and I are going to do a quick welcome and introduction and set the tone. The first thing I'm going to say is that we're going to try and talk at a decent speed. We really encourage everyone else to do that. And in true fashion, we're running a little late. So at Deborah, I'm going to miss some of the things that we were going to do. But what I do want to say is that this is a space for everyone who's in and around the arts and culture industry. It's also for the supporters of the Campaign for the Arts, who are individuals who care really, really passionately about any issue around this. There's lots of different perspectives and experiences, and actually we see this as a moment to be able to model how we can all speak well to each other and voice our opinions. Deborah and I are going to spend a couple of minutes just explaining what's going on so that you can literally sit back, hear and relax. So Deborah, I think you've got a couple of questions for me.
Well, I think it's a basic question to start, Suzanne. We hear the word a lot, but what exactly is a hustings?
So as I say in my day-to-day life on many things, I'm not an expert, but that's what makes me useful to answer questions. So really simply put, a hustings is a meeting where election candidates or parties tell us their policies and answer questions from the audience. So essentially, it's a Q&A. And we've invited representatives from all the major parties in the UK. And we're truly delighted that so many of them have agreed to come and talk about arts, culture, and heritage issues. So each speaker is here representing a different party. Some are running to be elected, some are members of the House of Lords, and some have held roles in the last government or at a local level. They're all here to tell us about their parties, ideas and policies. We have representatives from England, Wales and Northern Ireland. It's really important to actually remember that systems and structures are different in parts of the UK. So some parties are running against each other, others are only running in certain constituencies, and there may be other parties and independent candidates to consider in your constituency when you cast your vote?
Very quickly, Suzanne, we've seen a lot of hustings over the last few weeks. How is this one going to be different and complement the ones we've seen already?
So first and foremost, really, this is about arts, culture, heritage, and creativity. But of course, that will mean we touch on different topics. We've got our questions from everyone across What Next, Campaign for the Arts, and a broader audience. And so we've focused in on those questions that are most common, and we are not touching those questions that have already been asked, answered really well outside of this. But let me ask you a question, Deborah. How is today going to work? Take us very quickly through the next hour.
Great. So we're really pleased to be joined today by 7 representatives from different parties across the UK. We were to have had Grant Costello from the SNP. He's unfortunately unwell, so of course we send best wishes for a speedy recovery. All the representatives, as you say, not all wanting to be MPs, some in the House of Lords and so on, but they're all going to be asked to answer the same questions. And I'm going to give them a tight timing, either a minute or even 30 seconds to answer. I will have an opportunity, time allowing, to follow up if we feel some of them have perhaps fudged or not been clear. And my role really is to keep everyone to time and to the question. And I would say we want representatives today to answer what we'd asked them, but also to focus on what their party is going to do and not to spend the time telling us what another party has done or hasn't done. We can all judge that for ourselves.
Okay, I'm going to touch a bit more on that, but first about sort of access. And by that, I just mean how everyone gets to hear and take part in the best way possible, and also code of conduct. So to everyone, especially the representatives, please try not to use jargon or acronyms. We don't have much time. So there is this temptation to speak at speed. Please don't. It makes it so much harder. There is BSL interpretation. Captions are being auto-generated through YouTube, but will be professionally captioned in the stream text link, which will be coming up in the YouTube chat. If representatives speak in Welsh, they will translate into English afterwards. For those that it's useful, the video will remain on the Southbank Centre YouTube channel to be watched after the event. Questions will be posted in the YouTube live chat, so do watch in theatre mode to see a larger screen with chat at the same time. And now, just before I hand back over to Deborah, I just want to talk through a few things. And this is for everybody, both the representatives and those of us that are listening. What are we expecting of our representatives? This is our opportunity as the audience to hear what people really think and really crucially, what they will do. We're not here to influence. We are really here to listen. All of my work is about power. And this is one spectacular moment where the power with us, with the ability to listen. The people that we're hearing from will have some role in making, championing arts policy, post the election, whatever the outcome. So to the representatives, I say, are you answering the question in the allocated time? And to us as the audience, use your power to listen to what is said. Listen if they're not answering the question and draw your own conclusions, because you will have the power to vote. Deborah, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. Some really great thoughts for us to bear in mind there. And now it's my great pleasure to welcome the party representatives. And I think what we want to do is hear immediately, as soon as we can, from them. I'd like them to introduce themselves, but I want to do this in a kind of quick fire way, if I may. So I will call each of you by your party, and I'm asking you for 3 quick fire responses. They're pretty easy. Your name, a brief audio description of yourself, and you've heard some examples of that, and then a piece of art or heritage that you've recently seen that's made an impact on you. Maximum 20 seconds, so really short and sharp. I'll start so you can see what we're after. I'm Deborah Bull, a white middle-aged female, collar-length light brown hair, wearing a green shirt. And I loved hearing Tiger O'Connor singer-songwriter on Saturday at my local arts venue in Suffolk, the Bank. So we go first to our representative, the Minister for the Arts, Heritage and Libraries from the Conservative Party.
Hello, I'm Stephen Parkinson. I'm a white man in my early 40s. I'm wearing a blue shirt and round black glasses. And I'm spoiled for choice, really, on arts and heritage that have made an impact. But the thing I've seen most recently, which I'm still grinning from, is a thing called Organoki, karaoke to the church organ, which took place in St Giles Church in Camberwell, which is just around the corner from where I live, and just saw a whole bunch of people of all ages and backgrounds coming together in this grade 2-star listed building to sing their hearts out with great delight. It was silly and wonderful and great fun.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm going to move on to the Green Party's spokesperson for culture, sport and digital inclusion.
Thank you, Deborah. I'm Jack Lenox. I am a man with greying brown hair and a white shirt and black glasses. And the most recent thing I've seen the thing that just came straight to mind is I saw a production of The Flying Dutchman at the Royal Opera House with the great Bryn Tervel. And yeah, it was really fabulous. And that's the most recent thing I can think of.
That's great. Thank you. We move now to the Shadow Minister for Creative Industries and Digital from the Labour Party.
I'm Chris Bryant. I'm ginger. I'm heavily freckled on my nose and cheeks, according to my first passport, and I'm wearing a white shirt and glasses. The last thing I went to see was, well, the last two things, because there were 2 nights in a row. I went at the Southbank Centre to see Shaka Khan, which was amazing. I'm Every Woman. And then the next night I went to see Pink at Tottenham Hotspur, and that was the best gig I've ever been to in my life.
Brilliant.
And Deborah, if you could do the aerobatics as well next time you're performing, that'd be amazing.
I'll bear that in mind. Thank you, Chris. We move now to the Liberal Democrats and the spokesperson for culture, media and sport.
Hello, I'm Jane Bonham-Carter. I'm wearing headphones. I'm white, glasses, fair hair. And the thing I absolutely recommend to everyone is an Italian film called C'è ancora domani, There's Still Tomorrow. I come from a good European party, and this was an uplifting film about female empowerment and the power of democracy, actually. And then declaring an interest, my sister is the curator of the RA Schools, and the RA Schools show 2024 is unbelievable.
Thank you. And we move on now to Plaid Cymru and the spokesperson for finance, culture and the Welsh language.
Bore da, I'm Heledd Fychan. I'm a white 43-year-old woman with shoulder-length brown hair, wearing a red and black dress. I'm in my lounge. If you hear any snoring, my dog is sleeping behind me, out of shot at the moment. I recently saw Nai at the Wales Millennium Centre, written by Tim Price, starring Michael Sheen, which was phenomenal, telling the story of an Erin Bevan and very relevant in terms of the NHS now.
Great, thank you. We now come to the Alliance Party of Northern Ireland, the spokesperson for children and young people, arts and culture and communities.
Hi there, I am Sian, Mulholland. I am a white female in my late 30s. I have coppery coloured straight hair in a bob with a natural white streak at the front. I have large round turquoise and brown glasses, and I'm wearing a flory top. The most recent piece of art that I witnessed was my 7-year-old son's cultus celebration. So that's an Irish traditional music celebration of his year of learning the tin whistle. So thankfully much better at the end of the year than at the start.
Thank you. And our final representative isn't here yet. She is on her way, Claire Hannah from the Social Democratic and Labour Party. So she would join in as soon as she's here. A fantastic diverse range of culture there, and nobody mentioned Taylor Swift. So well done on that. Now, going forward, I'm going to be referring to each of you by your party, not your name, so that we're clear who we're hearing from. And we move to our first question. There has been much discussion over the last year about the role of an arts council, where its focus should be and where its resources should be allocated. So what do you believe is the core purpose of an Arts Council. And I think for clarity, as we probably, some of us are aware, the equivalent of the Arts Council in Scotland is Creative Scotland. So I'm coming first to the Conservatives, and you have 1 minute.
Thank you. The role of an Arts Council should be to nurture and champion high quality, challenging and innovative culture and creativity across the whole country, engaging people of all backgrounds, no matter where they live, so that everyone has the opportunity to enjoy the life-changing power of the arts, whether that's as artists, participants or audiences, and to do that independently of the government of the day. I'm proud that thanks to the increased grant that we provided to the Arts Council in England, we got an extra £43 million at the last spending review. It now funds a record number of organisations in more places than ever before. But it's also right that we make sure that it is delivering as effectively as possible for everyone who cares about the work that it does, which is why we have launched and would continue the independent review into the Arts Council that we started earlier this year.
Thank you, and thank you for keeping to time. We move now to the Green Party.
Yeah, thank you. So for the Green Party, arts and culture is, we see it as a very crucial part of our well-being. And we think that active participation is very important ahead of passive consumption. And so in that vein, I think at the core of the Arts Council should be, I think, what is now its former strapline, which is great art for everyone. It should be a body that is reaching out as deeply and as broadly across the UK as it possibly can, and fostering arts and culture across every community, every demographic. I agree with some of what was said by the previous speaker, Stephen. I think it's very important that it remains entirely independent of government. And I think, sadly, we have seen quite a lot of meddling in the Arts Council, and I'm sure we'll come back to this over the course of this hustings. But I think, yes, it should be fostering the greatest of art, but also fostering the broadest and most diverse forms of art possible across all of our communities.
Thank you very much. We come now to Labour.
Thank you. Well, first of all, the arts are not a luxury. They're not an add-on. They are an absolute must-have for a country that really wants to prosper, and economically and socially and emotionally and spiritually and in every other way possible. So an Arts Council is essential, especially because it needs to be completely independent from ministerial meddling, as has already been said. This is not easy. Ministers are constantly asked what they think about this or that financial grant that's been made. But I think it's really important, that self-denying ordinance from ministers about artists. In the end, it's about fostering new talent, enabling new audiences, extending access, enabling risk, and letting everyone see exceptional things. And I would say, I don't think that very high quality is necessarily elitism. I want people to see the very best that is possible, whether it's in ballet or opera or pop music or theatre, whatever it may be.
Thank you, Chris. We come now to the Lib Dems.
Hello, sorry, I just have to warn you, I'm a bit unstable with my connection here, but I hope I will manage this. Well, I agree with everything that's been said. The core purpose should be what was envisaged by John Maynard Keynes, who was a good liberal, of course. The first priority, that while money for the arts comes from the public purse, the independence of artists and arts organisations are protected at all costs. We must keep arm's length principle. I am a trustee of the Lowry, which is based in Salford. An example of how interference can be negative was cutting back on funding for large London organisations means they are no longer able to tour, and that has a detrimental effect to those organisations outside the capital.
Thank you, and we come now to Plaid Cymru.
Diolch. Well, crucially, we need to make access to the arts, culture and heritage sectors possible for all. And I see the Arts Council as being central to unleash the power of culture and the arts and its potential to transform lives. The link between health and well-being is so well established, and yet we see government still invest in silos in terms of budgets. So wherever you are, whatever your background, whatever your age, you should be able to participate. Raymond Williams famously said, culture is ordinary, but we're seeing the arts become increasingly elitist because people are costed out of participating, or venues are closing. We're seeing local museums, local libraries close. Independence of government is a must. We've seen the UK government try and limit things like a decolonisation practice. So that must be central. So to make arts accessible, it is important we have an organisation that is independent of government, but focused on delivering for people.
Thank you. And we now have the Alliance.
So for me, I think there's a balance between an arts council, or that an arts council needs to strike, between being the conduit of government funding and being the most vocal advocate and supporter of the arts. And that tension then comes from when government doesn't adequately fund the arts based on need or value of contribution. So there is a balance to be struck there between being the advocate for the sector who fights their corner, pushes for the showcasing and promotion of groundbreaking art, whilst also being slightly constrained by a link to the Department for Communities in Northern Ireland. And I think that's a difficult line to walk. In my view, an arm's length body should be just that, a vehicle for investment to flow through to the sector, but with the freedom to push back, to lobby the government for further investment, and a body that has the artists and art organisations at the heart of every decision. And there may be other bodies who can do that, but none with the access, leverage and insight that an arts council has. And the department, in my view, needs to view that body as a critical friend and not an extension of its office.
Thank you. And I'm just going to check. I don't think we have Claire yet here to answer this question. So I just want to pick up on one thing that a few of you touched on, which is this issue of arm's length. And whether, as our last speaker very helpfully pointed out, there is a natural tension here because government has a national policy, and it can deliver some of it through the arts, and therefore there is an element of directing. But my sense is some of you feel that's gone too far. So let me just ask a couple of you, maybe we'll go to Labour and say, how would you ensure the arts, the length of the arm was right?
Well, Deborah, you're tempting me to say nasty things about the Conservatives, and I'm being very good at not doing any of that. Because I don't think that's very fruitful. This is about the future. And look, in the main, of course, here in a general election, we're talking about the future of the Arts Council England, not about what happens in other places, even though I'm a Welsh MP and have an interest in what happens in Wales. And the truth is we need a proper review of the Arts Council, a full top to bottom review, so that the money is going in the right direction, not my judgment, but on that it's well spent. That you don't have crazy decisions that make it, for instance, completely impossible for the ENO to survive in London. And I think I'll come on when we come to the funding question, okay, to the question about what we do there as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Chris, and thank you for resisting your temptation there. We have two parties then promising a review, one a continuing review of the Arts Council, and we have Claire Hannah with us. So Claire, you're a little bit late to this question. You haven't heard your, I'll say your colleagues, but could you give us, I think you've had the first question about the what should be the focus and the core purpose of an arts council, and I'll give you a minute. But before you do that, could you just audio describe yourself for our audience, please?
Sure. My name is Claire Hannah. I'm a former Member of Parliament for South Belfast and current job seeker, and apologies for being late. I was on the school run and in fact enjoying a little arts performance end of year from the class, and I am sitting in a pretty boring beige office in terms of an audio description. I mean, as Chris touched on, obviously, as a UK MP, and I chair an all-party group, the Performers Alliance, that looks specifically at the economic well-being of arts and creative workers. But my day-to-day interaction would be the Arts Council here in Northern Ireland, which does a reasonably good job I suppose, distributing funding, but it's no secret that the arts in Northern Ireland are chronically underfunded. I think operating at about 1/3 of what a comparable distribution body gets in England, and about 1/6 of what they get in the Republic of Ireland. So I suppose sustaining the ecosystem of artists and creative practitioners needs to be their core role, both in England and here in Northern Ireland.
Thank you, Hannah, and welcome to the group. We're going to move on to question 2 now. As you know, these questions have been sourced from you, the audiences, in advance, and this is about local government funding for the arts. We know local government is the biggest funder of culture, heritage and libraries, but in England, Scotland and Wales, the funding has fallen by 40 to 50% since 2010. So we want to know from each of you, how concerned are you about this? And crucially, what would your party propose to do about it? And we have a minute for this question once again, and I'm going to start with the Greens.
Yes, thank you. So we are fundamentally committed to restoring spending on arts and culture to at least pre-2010 levels. And that's something that I've campaigned for very strongly within the party. I think even as part of the question, I sit on Lancaster City Council, and our budget has been cut by about 65% since 2010. So I think the numbers are even worse than they might appear. I think that cuts to council budgets have almost completely eradicated localised funding, and that's a scandal that has gone largely unreported. We largely focus on the Arts Council itself. So properly funding local councils is crucial. And we know that, I think it was Arts Development UK who did this study, I think in 2018, to cite the point that for every £1 that local councils spend on the arts, they get £4 back in terms of what that brings to the local economy and everything else. So yes, it's absolutely crucial, and it's a travesty that we've seen so many organisations fall apart because of the lack of local funding.
Thank you very much. We go next to Labour, please.
I can't see my clock. Well, first of all, if you look at the package that used to exist pre-2010 of funding for the arts and the heritage sector in general, it included EU funding, money from local government, and from central government, and of course earned income and philanthropy. And we are very clear that we need to have a full review of the whole package of the finance that comes to the arts and to the creative industries in general, because EU money's gone. Local authorities hardly have any money, and they're making very difficult decisions about whether to fund care for the elderly or the local theatre. And philanthropy has dried up everywhere outside London and the southeast of England. So we need to have a full review of how we can get more money into the arts across the whole of the UK. Now, Rachel Reeves isn't just over there behind my right-hand shoulder, but she might as well be, because I'm painfully aware that this is going to be the worst financial inheritance any government might possibly receive after this general election. So I can't make enormous promises about additional funding. But what I can say is,
I'm going to stop you
I
soon.
believe that it makes our economy grow if you fund the arts properly.
Thank you, Chris. A little bit over time there, but we come next to the Lib Dems. Jane, we're not hearing you.
Sorry,
I
was
got
just
you
saying,
now. Off you go.
sorry, apologies if I'm repeating what others have said, because I keep freezing. Yes, we are extremely concerned. One of the things that we would introduce to help councils, this is not a direct funding response, but is the provision of multi-year settlements. And we also believe in creating enterprise zones, which will help private public investment and regeneration projects in local areas. On the funding point, and I think Chris might have mentioned this, I'm not sure, we absolutely believe in applying to participate fully in Creative Europe, which gives access to a 204.
I think Jane has frozen. Let's just see if she unfreezes. No, she doesn't. Oh, Jane, sorry, you're back.
Sorry.
You've got a few more seconds if you want to just finish off.
Did you hear my reference to Creative Europe?
Yes. Okay, we are losing you, Jane. I might see if the tech people can help, perhaps by turning off your camera might help. But for now, let's move on to Plaid Cymru.
Thank you. This is one of the reasons why I stood for election actually in 2021. I worked for National Museum Wales prior to that and on the board of the Museums Association, and I was hugely concerned to see how deep the cuts were. And we need to have a plan for our local museums, local libraries and cultural centres. I believe that they do. Well, they're able to unlock so much potential within our areas, but if we lose them, it has such a detrimental impact. So as this has devolved, I'd like to see a cultural strategy that also explicitly looks at local services, and we need to update the research available because a lot of the figures are outdated. A lot of the plans regarding local museums, local libraries and arts organisations go back a decade or more. So we need to have a vision but support them, because when we lose that infrastructure, we'll lose access to arts and culture and heritage.
Thank you very much. We come now to Alliance.
So in Northern Ireland, the majority of arts funding comes through the Arts Council via the Department for Communities. We estimate that public spend on the arts in Northern Ireland is approximately £5 per capita per head, in comparison to our closest comparison, which is Wales, at approximately £10.51, over £11 per capita in Scotland, and a whopping £21.58 in Ireland. So I want to see the baseline funding of the Arts Council restored to the level it was at before last year's 5% cut as an absolute minimum. I've advocated for a cost of living inflation uplift on the baseline budget. I've asked the Minister to reinstate £5 million per year that the Arts Council spends from its lottery grants, that it has to subsidise core costs for organisations with at the expense of new creative art. We want to see a per capita spend increased across all of Northern Ireland, and we have a culture, arts and heritage strategy with, I think it's 93 recommendations sitting on a shelf that the Minister has got to implement.
Thank you. And we now have SDLP.
Deeply concerned, Chris and Sian and others set out the economic return and the value of the arts. But the point is, for a region like ours in Northern Ireland, we will survive and thrive based on our human capital and almost nothing else. This isn't a resource or an area rich in natural resources or capital or tech or anything like that. Our people are the resource, and we need them to be creative and broad-minded, and we know that will come from exposure and interaction with arts and culture. So we also know so much of promotion of this region, everything from Dairy Girls to Heaney to all of our musical output is how we're selling the region. So yes, it's making that case to the lead parties here who control the budget. That's an investment in the future. There's also a lot more we can be doing on a north-south basis. Sian set out the much higher per capita funding in the Republic. They also have a pilot artists basic income scheme. We had the Minister in Westminster last year with our all-party group exploring the potential for that, and it has proven to be extremely successful and has allowed many of those artists to kind of create and scale up what they're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. We've heard a few things there. We've heard about better making the economic case. We've heard about multi-year settlements and about the sort of connectivity of local cultural offers and the multiple players. Let me come to Jack for the Green Party. How much power do you think local areas should have in decision making on these issues?
I think a lot. I think there are sort of two distinct roles when you look at what the Arts Council does. You know, you have these bigger institutions that the Arts Council works with and funds, and bigger organisations. But I think at the grassroots level, it is local councils that are really in the best position to gauge, you know, what the most effective groups and organizations are and who should be supported. Also, of course, local councils own lots of property. You know, they own the sorts of centres that people can use. There's lots of overlaps there. I think one of the problems we've had is that because councils generally have had their budgets cut so much, and they're now we've lost a lot of people. We've lost a lot of the expertise that we once had, and this cuts across all sorts of areas. At Lancaster City Council, we had specialist staff who looked after our multi-use games areas and that sort of thing, and they're all now sort of crumbling and falling apart, and it's a real travesty. So, I think at the local level, local councils are key.
Thank you. And in my excitement at the range of answers, I failed to come to Stephen and the Conservative Party. So Stephen, I do apologise. Your 1 minute, please, on the original question. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you very much. And look, I agree. Local government's a hugely important partner. As Jack's just said, these are people that make decisions about what's right and exciting for their communities. And there's no doubt that councils everywhere are under pressure, particularly from the rising cost of adult social care, which is vastly increasing pressure on their budgets. I've spoken to a number of organisations who've been affected by this in areas from Birmingham to Woking and far beyond. And I know the great uncertainty and distress that it can cause for people working in the sector. That's why we made a further £600 million available in January, and why we've increased local authorities' core spending power by 7.5% in cash terms. But it's also why we've been working with the Local Government Association and councils of all parties and none to show how arts and culture and heritage can help to deliver so many of the other things that they have to deliver, such as the health and well-being benefits they bring, the return on investment, the economic stimulus that others have mentioned. That's really important. And it's also why we've helped all these organisations through the cultural tax reliefs, which we made permanent in the last budget.
Thank you, Stephen, and apologies again. I think there'll be a chance to pick up on some of those later issues in a later question too. Let's move on to question 3, which is around freelancers. As we know, they are the connective tissue, the glue, if you like, of the creative sector. But policy so often seems to be blind to their specific challenges and needs. So to each of you, I want to know, what policies will you put in place to enable freelancers to have equitable working conditions and to earn a decent living? This time you have 30 seconds each. So short, sharp responses, please. And we are coming first to Labour.
Well, first of all, we need to reform the apprenticeship levy so that it really works in the creative sector. It hasn't thus too far. It needs to be able to be portable and flexible. Secondly, we need new rights at work. We need to put an end to fire and rehire and to exploitative 0 hours contracts. 50% of the industry is, we need to allow touring in Europe, and we need to support the BBC.
That really was short and sharp. Thank you, Chris. I'm really clear. So thank you for that. We come next to the Lib Dems. Now let's see if we can...
Yes, I think you can hear me, and I might have to go. You might have to lose my face, but
30
anyway.
seconds.
I agree totally about replacing. We agree totally about replacing the apprenticeship levy with a more flexible training and skills levy. We also believe in appointing a creative freelance commissioner to champion the needs of creative freelancers, in particular to address the UK's tax and benefits regime, which as it stands does not fit with freelance needs, and also negotiate free and simple short-term travel arrangements. I'm inevitably coming back to Europe for UK artists to perform in the EU, which will help freelancers in their ability to work abroad.
Thank you. And next we come to Plaid Cymru.
Thank you. Echo the comments about the EU. It's been disastrous. We need to sort it out. We would create a Welsh freelancers fund. We'd apply lessons learned from the basic income for the arts scheme in the Republic of Ireland. We're watching that very closely. But certainly we're losing too many freelancers at the moment. It's having a detrimental impact, and we need to be taking action.
Fantastic. Thank you. Next we come to Alliance.
Yeah, so I too would like to see a replication of the Universal Basic Income pilot in the Republic to be rolled out in Northern Ireland. I'd like to see, excuse me, I'd like to see tax deductions for artistic expenses, simplified tax filing to relieve some of the admin burden on freelancers. I want to see more subsidised artistic workspaces like studios, rehearsal spaces, creative co-working facilities. And we're in a very unique position in Northern Ireland. The Brexit made touring in the EU a very difficult situation, so we want to fix that.
Thank you. We're hearing lots of consistency on this one. We come next to the SDLP, please.
Thank you very much. Yes, what the others have said as well. Unfortunately, the pandemic exposed a lot of the gaps in provision. A lot of people who were moving, for example, from short-term PAYE contracts weren't eligible for some of the schemes, and a report my all-party group produced exposed some of the failings of the universal of the benefit system, universal credit to capture artists. The Republic do have tax relief for those making their primary living from the Republic, and we crucially need to fund the key arts ecosystems. For example, the Lyric Theatre in my constituency, which is Northern Ireland's main producing theatre, which sustains around 300 creatives throughout the year.
Thank you. And we now come, I believe, we come to the SDLP. No, we just did that. I apologise. Conservative.
Thank you. Freelancers are absolutely vital to the sector and some of the most resilient people I've ever met, particularly in the face of the pandemic and its long tail. We will abolish Class 4 national insurance contributions, which will be a tax cut that will benefit 2 million self-employed people across the country. We want to ensure that our creators are properly protected and remunerated for their work as the impact of AI grows. And I've always made sure that we are engaging freelancers and their representatives, as well as the big organisations, for instance, making sure there was a freelance representative on the review of the Arts Council.
Thank you, Stephen. And finally, the Greens, please.
Yeah, thank you. I do feel I have to sort of break the sense of unity we have a little bit, and with Stephen's last answer, it points out that during the pandemic, so many freelancers were left out in the cold. There was no furlough for many people who were working freelance. As others have said, I think that UBI would be great. That's a long-term plan for the Green Party. We'd love to see the impact of that on the cultural sector. I think a key thing as well for us is that we'd like to see the prompt payment code brought into law, and that would require people to pay their invoices on time. And that's one of the worst things I think when you're a freelancer, is that it's just so difficult getting paid.
Thank you. Loads of really practical suggestions there. Whoever is in government would do well to review that selection of answers and simply do some of those things, I would think. But I'm forced by time to move on. We have another really important question, which is around disabled people. As we know, disabled people make up 23% of the population in the UK, and the UN has reported worsening violation of their rights. So we want to know, how will each party support disabled people's rights as artists, participants, and audiences? I'm afraid once again, I'm going to have to give you just 30 seconds each, and we are going to start this time with the Lib Dems. Assuming we have Jane, and it feels like we may not, so let's go instead to Plaid, Cymru, and we can come back to Jane.
Thank you. Well, from many disabled people, that COVID provided an opportunity for them to participate more because lots of things moved online. We've seen a lot of that disappear at the moment. It allowed disabled artists to showcase as well their work. But we can't forget about the in-person experiences either. There are so many barriers that still remain. So things like, if mentioned in the previous answer, Welsh Freelancers Fund, if we have a basic income scheme, that has to also include disabled artists so that they can participate in that, enable access to everyone to be able to enjoy as artists or participants.
Thank you. Let me just see if I can summon Jane at this point. Lib Dems, yes? Okay, in which case, let's go on to the SDLP, please.
Thank you very much. We're blessed here. We have an organisation called University of the Atypical, which is a Belfast-based group empowering disabled people who are interested in or working in the arts. They focus on deaf, disabled and neurodiverse people, and they have a festival each year that really showcases participation, and they fund both creatives and participation. And through Belfast City Council here, we were able to give support to the Gig Buddies scheme, which pairs up people with disabilities, including intellectual disabilities, who want to attend gigs who mightn't have the support to as well. But there's so much more we can be doing.
Thank you. And next, please, the Conservatives.
This is so important. Everybody should be able to play their full part in our cultural life. And of course, the arts are a great platform for raising awareness about the sort of change that we want to see in society. That's why we've worked with the Arts Council to support a range of organisations and initiatives like Alleyne, championed by Andrew Miller, the former government advisor on disability access. And I'm proud that the Arts Council England is supporting an increased number of organisations led by people living with disabilities through the current national portfolio. We also have our Museum Estate and Development Fund and our Libraries Improvement Fund, which have helped organisations adapt their building to make them more accessible for everyone.
Thank you very much. Let's keep going with on to the Greens, please.
Yep, sure. So I think one of the issues here is access, as we've all been saying. And I think some of the cuts that have been made to disability benefits and making it increasingly more difficult to get those benefits is part of what makes it so difficult. So we want to ensure that people can lead fully enriched lives with access to everything that anyone would expect to have access to. We would like to see free transport for 16 to 18-year-olds with special educational needs and disabilities. And I think as well, then also providing that in-job support, so that if you are an arts organisation, and if you have disabled people joining your group, that the people joining your group can get access to the support they need to fully engage in the activities that you're providing for them.
Thank you very much. We come next to Labour, please.
Well, we probably also need to make politics slightly more accessible to people with disabilities as well. The Palace of Westminster is just about the worst example of this on record in the country. And I get terribly embarrassed when people come to a beautiful building which nobody can have proper access to. The Equality Act has never been fully implemented. There are lots of buildings which still aren't properly disabled friendly. I was very impressed when I went to Aber Voyage, because the whole thing was built new and it was perfectly possible for anybody with any physical disability to attend. I also point out that broadband, 19% of the poorest homes in this country still have no internet to home. And that is a real problem for people who aren't able to participate even in an event like this.
Thank you. And Alliance, and then we will try Jane again at the end. Alliance, please.
I want to see all venues work with organisations like Attitude is Everything. All artistic spaces should sign up to a live events access charter, so they're accessible to both artists and audience in a genuine and non-tokenistic way. I want to see greater thought given to disabled people in the ticketing and seat allocation process, to see carers tickets offered as standard when booking accessible seating, and regulations in place to ensure venues consider people with disabilities in their risk assessments as standard.
Thank you. And last but not least, we have the Lib Dems. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we feel very strongly about a more inclusive and diverse workforce.
Jane, perhaps you turn your camera off now. We might be able to hear you rather than see you.
Can you?
Okay, I'm going to have to cut away. One quick pickup, if I may, which I'm going to come to Labour on. You spoke a lot about access to buildings, but we did hear the Greens talk about the financial support which allows disabled people access to work. Can you speak very briefly about what your party would do to allow disabled artists to be in the workforce? And I will have to ask you to be quick.
Yes, sorry, I was trying to unmute myself, but I already unmuted. Yeah, I mean, it's a very fair point. I wasn't sure whether we had 30 seconds or 60 seconds, so I was going to 30 seconds, but I think we had 60. No, I think it's a perfectly legitimate point, and that's must be a key aim of the Arts Council England, to extend the participation from people with every different form of ability and disability as well.
Great.
There is one other thing, if I might, just very briefly, which is about tickets. We want to tackle the problem of ticket touts who are buying up tickets which are often specifically available for people with disabilities and then selling them on at a very inflated price. We want to tackle that secondary market.
Very good thing for any incoming government to note. That is a good idea. We're going to move on, thank you, to the first of 3 questions on education. The first is to ask each of you what you think should be the place of art subjects and creativity in the school curriculum. Now, you're going to have to be very creative because you've got 30 seconds to answer it. And I am coming first to Alliance. Thank you.
So we need to expand the arts and creative skills offered at all levels of education in an age-appropriate way. Right now, our curriculum in Northern Ireland is quite prescriptive and it's not offered in all schools at GCSE or A-level. Another very important element to this is the careers advice given in schools regarding the creative sector, and feedback from young people I've consulted with showed little to no advice given other than have a backup plan. So we need a thriving sector, and yet so few students are given any direction on how to access a career in the creative industries after their education, and that has to change.
Thank you, beautifully to time. Thank you very much. We come next to the Greens, please.
Yeah, so we are advocating for an increase in school funding with an £8 billion investment in schools that would include a £2 billion for a pay uplift for teachers, because we have so many teachers leaving the industry. And on arts specifically, we want to have arts and vocational subjects treated equally within the curriculum. So for us, it's a top level thing. We think this is something that should be treated in the same way that we treat the other subjects. It's such a huge part for me personally. Like arts and culture were a part of what gave me the confidence to do things like this.
Thank you. Next to the Conservatives.
They're essential, not just to make sure that we have a pipeline of diverse and talented people to help us continue to grow our thriving creative industries, but because of the huge benefits that arts and creativity bring to individual people's lives. We've refreshed our national plan for music education and backed that with £25 million for new musical instruments. And we're working with the Department for Education, teachers and cultural professionals to develop a new cultural education plan, looking at the role that cultural organisations can play, the importance of continuous professional development and much more.
Thank you. Next, Labour, please.
First of all, you've got to make sure that every single child in this country gets a proper creative and artistic education at primary and at secondary school. It can't just be kids who go to very expensive schools that have a theatre and a performing arts department and an art room and all the rest of it. It has to be every single child. We should move from STEM to STEAM, so we include the arts for every child. It's a disgrace that over the last 14 years, we've seen such a collapse in the number of students studying music. And I want every child to have a possible career in the creative industries as well. And we cannot have the creative industries as just a hereditary industry.
Thank you. We come now to the Lib Dems with our fingers crossed. Okay, at this point, let's go to Plaid Cymru, and we might come back to Jane. Hi, thank you.
Diolch. Well, the new Welsh curriculum has creativity as central to it, so very exciting, but it comes at a time when school budgets have been cut, and actually there are less opportunities then for schools to work with artists and creatives, or for children to be able to go to the theatre experience and so on. So we need to ensure the school budgets are in place, but also support teachers through training and so on to ensure they're able to unleash the potential of the arts within our schools.
Thank you. And finally, the SDLP, please.
Thanks. Yes, as others have said, just making sure that the arts in all their forms are esteemed and equally billed in the curriculum, and not in the stampede of employability, not losing sight of the fact that everybody in the workplace needs to be able to think and innovate and express their ideas and interpret the world, and not lose sight of how they're doing that through the arts and creativity, and absolutely ensure that there isn't a participation gap, and that creative practices aren't the first thing to go when budgets are squeezed.
Thank you. A quick follow-on. I want to ask Plaid Cymru. You have a very different education system in Wales. Is there something in particular that you think England should be doing, or England and indeed the other nations should be doing, to copy your system?
Well, we're still in very early days in terms of the new curriculum, but certainly we thought, and there was cross-party support for this, that there needed to be that shift and that creativity had to be central. So looking at the future skills and looking at the kind of career opportunities, identifying the power of culture. We have a Future Generations Act in Wales, which it then has the art as central to it as well. So this is part of that wider acknowledgement of the role of arts and culture within society in Wales.
Great, thank you. And Jane Bonham-Carter for the Lib Dems. I think we've got you back. So 30 seconds, please, on arts subjects and creativity in the school curriculum. Okay, I'm afraid we're going to have to move on as we are running over time. We're going to come to our second question on education, which is about higher education. So cuts and closures to arts and creative HE courses have been widely reported. What do you believe is the value of these courses, and what action would you take to re-establish creative and arts degrees as subjects that are both valid and valued? We have 30 seconds on this. I'm coming first to Plaid, please.
We want to see a strategy from Welsh Government with our higher education institutions. These are absolutely central. Their potential in terms of the economy as well. So we are really concerned that these courses are being cut, not promoted within schools as well. So very much want to see a strategy and promotion to safeguard them in the future.
Okay, thank you. And next, Alliance, please.
I think there's huge value in artistic degrees. We have a thriving School of Art here in Northern Ireland, and I'm a huge advocate of bringing a BIM Music Institute to Belfast or Derry to increase that academic offer. The issue is not always the delivery of the course, but the career progression offered post-qualification. And I think what we're pushing for is that long-term strategic funding for the sector in Northern Ireland as a whole. But we want to see more formal education practices and courses for all art forms, not just the most popular.
Okay, thank you. Next we come to the SDLP.
Yeah, thanks. As others have said, just sustaining and respecting those courses, as Sian mentioned, we do have a genuinely burgeoning creative scene here. At one point, there was more television being made in Northern Ireland than there was in London, and we need to keep the pipeline of workers for that. We also need to fund. There are some small schemes on teaching the business of being an artist, and I suppose supporting people with those kind of, I suppose, administrative skills of promotion and bookkeeping and all that kind of stuff.
Thank you. And next to the Conservatives.
Well, I didn't do my history degree because I was thinking about my future potential earnings, but because I was curious about the world around me, wanted to expand my mind and my appreciation of it. So we should value the courses for themselves, as well as for the impact that they have on our creative economy. The creative industries are one of the 5 priority areas the Chancellor set out. It's really important for the pipeline of talent that we get people into the sector. For some, that's university, but there are so many other routes that people can be looking at as well. That's why we've got to focus on getting flexible apprenticeships so that people can choose the route into these exciting industries that's right for them.
So in your view, low value courses, is that a term that you're comfortable with?
Well, I think we're so proud of our world-class higher education sector here. It's not just about the earnings that you get, particularly in the immediate years after graduation, particularly in our sectors. That's not how we value the importance of these courses. It's about getting that pipeline of people into the creative industries.
It's very good to have that on the record. Thank you. Let's go to the Greens.
Yes, I feel we're somewhat overlooking that there is a crisis of funding in our universities at the moment, in our higher education sector more broadly. And I think the core of that is this creeping marketization that we've seen of higher education, the steady increase of fees, and this situation people are now in, where they're looking at degrees based on what it's going to earn them afterwards. And that's not what higher education should be about. So the Green Party, we want to scrap tuition fees for undergraduates. We think that education is worth investing in, and that we'll see returns on investment in that, and restoring maintenance grants as well.
Very good. Thank you very much. Labour, please.
Well, first of all, I'm sick and tired of ministers undermining creative industries courses in universities and colleges up and down the land. These are the route into careers. There, 1 in 14 people in the UK now works in creative industries. My guess is in 10 years' time, it'll be 1 in 10. And we should celebrate that, not constantly undermine it. And I just note that ministers are even now saying that they're going to pay for some of their other manifesto commitments in this general election out of slashing more supposedly Mickey Mouse courses, even though they can't name a single Mickey Mouse course. Look, where it works really, really well is when you have a university working very, very closely with the industry nearby. For instance, in video games near Leamington Spa. And that's the kind of thing which we really need to foster.
Okay, thank you. And Lib Dems.
Yes. I hope you've missed me.
30 seconds.
I just want to say I agree with everything Chris said on that point. Can I please go back and say that art subjects in the should be included in English baccalaureate. We would ensure, as the Alliance said, access to industry relevant career advice, and like Labour, we will give power to Ofsted to ensure schools are required to provide a rich curriculum, including the arts. So I know that was the last question, but I just agree with everything Chris said about this question. So I thought I'd
let
backwards.
you get it in, as it was indeed an actual question. So thank you. And I think we will move on to our third question now about education, because time is not on our side. All parties have plans in place for early years and for childcare. So what role does your party see for arts and culture in the early years system of the future? Again, I'm giving you 30 seconds, and we are starting with the SDLP, please.
It is absolutely core. Anybody who spends any amount of time around small children will know they are innately creative and confident about their ability. I mean, if you look at Scandinavian countries at 5, 6, 7, they're still digging around in muck and pasta dyed blue and all that kind of stuff. So the arts and expression should be absolutely central to our childcare offering. How paltry it is in Northern Ireland is the topic for another debate.
Okay, thank you very much. We come next to the Conservatives.
Yeah, look, the arts are the birthright of everyone, and we should be making sure that people have that opportunity from the earliest point in their lives. We're investing £300 million in wraparound childcare before and after school, and are committed to ensuring that children receive a broad and enriched education in and out of school, including through things like the music hubs. We're passionate about guaranteeing young people have access to opportunities, including cultural and creative experiences, to enrich their lives and inspire their future.
Thank you very much. And next to the Greens, please.
Sorry, I was just on mute there. Yeah, so I mean, for the Green Party, we think that early years education, we've got it all wrong, and I echo some of what was said about, looking to Scandinavian countries. We think that early years education should be centered around play. It should be centered around discovery, exploration, not to having to start doing homework. I've got a nephew whose homework started when he was 7 years old, and to me, it seems a complete anathema to what education should be about. And so, of course, if you're going to focus on play and on discovery and on exploration, then the arts is a huge part of that. Role-playing, drama. I know we're running short on time, so I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much. Next, please, Labour.
Yes. First of all, everything I said about primary and secondary schools applies to early years as well. The ability to play, I mean, it's fundamental to our humanity that we express ourselves. That's why we're social beings. So being able to take risks and learning how to problem solve, these are all part of a creative education, which you need to start very early in life. I would just say to the Minister, school trips have completely fallen off the agenda.
Can you speak to our audience, Chris, and not to the Minister, please?
Well, I've run out of time anyway.
Perfect. So, there may be time later. Thank you.
Yeah, except that nobody challenges anybody, and challenge is part of political debate.
Very good. We come now to Alliance, please.
Yes, so art is instrumental to a child's development, first vehicle of learning, crafts to develop fine motor skills, singing to improve communication, language development, or imaginative play and dance. It can be really inclusive way to communicate. So I want to see the arts made much more accessible and free for younger children. And a brilliant example of that in Northern Ireland is the Young at Arts Children's Festival. They make art family and child friendly, and it's a wonderful example of investment in creative planning.
Thank you very much. Lib Dem, Jane.
Yes, I always note that whenever politicians visit schools, the photo op is with them with kids painting or doing some kind of creative, something creative. So why is this not reflected in the arts being central to primary school kids' lives? We have a fully costed manifesto and would invest over 2.2 billion a year in our schools to make sure that every child has the best possible start, and this would obviously involve proper arts offers.
Gonna have to cut in as we're over time, but thank you. Probably a chance to say more on that later. And
as
Plaid,
all private schools do.
We heard your last point, and I think thank you for that. Plaid Cymru, please.
Well, we know now that the first 1,000 days of a child's life is absolutely crucial in terms of creating that foundation for life. We also acknowledge, in terms of the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child, that's also the right to participate in the arts essential. We need to turn that into reality. We also want to ensure that from the early years, we don't silo or decide what art forms are for boys and which ones are for girls. We need to enable every child to participate in all elements so that they can thrive and find the one thing that brings joy to their life.
Thank you. I want to do a very quick hands up question, and it will be the first two people. I'll give you, 10 seconds to answer. You've all spoken about quite a lot of art forms, but in some of the manifestos, we hear a prioritization of music within the education system. So we know there is a national plan for music education, and we know that the Labour manifesto has committed to music centres for music, or a plan for that. Does anybody want to argue either way that there should be a broad opportunity for young people to experience all the art forms? Is that important, or should they be prioritised? Anybody want to stick a hand up and come in? Thank you. Go for it. I think that's Plaid Cymru, and then Labour, and then that's it. Thank you.
I think music has been central because there's been such a cut to music services, but certainly in terms of dance, every element has to be there, because we try and give perhaps children one experience and they may not enjoy that one. We don't enjoy every form of culture or the arts. So why do we force children to just maybe have one narrow experience?
So choice is important. And I've got time for one more answer, and Labour was there with a hand up. Chris.
Yes, I'm a big fan of drama, simply partly because I was in the National Youth Theatre when I was a kid, but I know it's about expression and giving self-confidence. And sometimes I want to say to some of the kids in my own patch, the single most important thing I could give them is more self-confidence when they go for a job application, or when they go on for the rest of their life, or making personal decisions, about whether to say no to somebody else and things like that. So I think drama is also important.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. So we're on our last question, and we're going to have to be snappy. I'm going to ask you to do 45 seconds each rather than the minute you were promised. We want you to talk about whether there's another area of wider public policy where you're excited about the contribution that arts and heritage can make. So tell us about that and how you're going to make it happen. And if I can ask you to be 45 seconds, and we'll start with the Greens, please.
Thank you. So yeah, I mean, something that hasn't come up today is the climate and biodiversity crisis. And while not a policy area, I guess it's the thing that I would like to highlight as something where I think the arts has a massive role. We see the impacts of disaster movies and of disaster fiction and everything else. We're very good at imagining how bad things can be, but actually I think there's a huge role for the arts in painting that optimistic, hopeful future for how we can transform, how we can adapt, and how we can move to a much more equitable, happy planet, and that really excites me. And certainly there are some musicians already doing this now in terms of making albums that incorporate birdsong, and there are obviously some writers doing some fantastic fiction now around sort of, or kind of faction, as it were, around how the future could be. And I find that very exciting. I'd like to see a lot more of that.
Thank you. That's a great start. Conservatives, please.
Let me just very quickly come back to Sir Chris's challenge rightly on school trips, which understandably fell off a cliff during the pandemic for all the reasons we know, but also because of the inflationary costs of petrol and coaches and so on. That's why we've been trying to reduce inflation, make that easier. We've also got to make it administratively easier for people to take the children to these experiences. But look, arts and culture and heritage can have an impact in literally every other area of public policy. The arts are a platform for campaigning for social change and raising issues. I've mentioned the physical and mental health benefits that we know, the impact that they have on our economy and inward investment and tourism, through advocacy initiatives like Julie's Bicycle and the Theatre Green Book, the sector's leading the way on environmental issues. And in government, we've been leveraging the power to help regenerate communities, breathe new life into old buildings, to support jobs and tourism.
Pull you up there. Thank you. You slipped in something at the beginning. I spotted that. SDLP, please.
Northern Ireland is changing rapidly, but it is still a divided society, and it is still grappling with the legacy of the conflict and with sectarianism. But the arts has always been organic shared space, right from the punk movement that, while the Troubles was raging, birthed some of artists that we still enjoy today. The rave scene in Belfast in the 80s and 90s, when people were being killed outside by their religion. The two main parties here who practice a lot of sectarianism try and invent schemes to bring people together, and in their wildest dreams they couldn't come up with arts and theatre where nobody asks about anybody else's background, and we just need to properly fund and sustain it.
Thank you very much. Great example. Lib Dem now. Are we going to have James?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go for it.
Can you hear me?
You're a bit...
Right? Yes, you're brilliant. Okay. One thing, I think maybe Chris mentioned it. Can you hear me?
No, we can't.
Can you hear me?
We can't hear you, I'm afraid. I think we're going to have to move on. We'll go to Labour, please.
So I'm going to talk slightly differently, because I want to talk about one of the challenges that I think there is, which relates to technology. In one sense, the arts and technology, I don't think of them as completely separate, because lots of artists and musicians, I saw Sarah Snooks do the Oscar Wilde thing a few weeks ago. The combination of technology and problem solving, they're very similar uses of personal expression. But AI is a potential concern and challenge to us. So we need to think about how we can make sure that the creativity, the human-based creativity, is protected under copyright legislation into the future. We need, of course, people want to innovate, but they want to make sure that they've got a means of making a living.
Great, thank you, and perfectly to time, Chris. I'm Plaid Cymru, and we will soon be wrapping. Plaid Cymru, please.
Diolch. I mentioned earlier that we have a Future Generations Act in Wales, which is supposed to place culture on equal footing with every other element. I'd like to see that become a reality. We need to unleash the power of our arts, culture and heritage, acknowledge their transformational impact. Tackling poverty has to be a key driver for me. We have 29% of children in Wales living in poverty. If we are able to get this policy area right and embedded, I think it will unleash a lot of those children and young people's potential into the future, as well as have transformational impact on health and well-being, let alone the Welsh economy.
Thank you very much. And finally, Alliance.
So as the Alliance spokesperson for both the arts and children and young people, and as a former youth worker in the arts sector, I have to say youth provision, I've seen firsthand the impact of the arts in what they can have for developing self-esteem, sense of self, and that emergence of transferable skills. On top of that, as has been mentioned, in Northern Ireland, we're still grappling with identity issues and themes from a not so distant conflict. So peace and reconciliation work and identity exploration for young people through a vehicle of the arts really excites me. And I think if invested in properly, not just through the formal education sector, but also through the informal education sector, I think it could be a catalyst for huge societal change in Northern Ireland. And if combined with both formal and informal skills development, then I think that we could see a cohort of world-class creative industry professionals coming through.
Thank you, and thank you to you all. We are a few minutes over time, so I will start the wrap up by thanking everybody who's participated. Thank you too for speaking to our audience and sharing your ideas and thoughts with them. They are your voters. They will make their choice next week. Thank you to What Next and the Campaign for the Arts for incredible, speedy organisation. Do join both organisations if you're interested. I think there will be information in the chat on how you can do that. Thank you to Southbank for enabling so many people to be a part of this hustings. From me, that's a goodbye. Thank you.
And I need to hop in briefly to say a very big thank you also to our chair, Baroness Deborah Bull, CBE, and to Suzanne, and to you for joining us. Thank you.